It started with a single vibration, one forgotten phone on a polished palace table, and a message King Charles was never meant to see. A name from Camilla's past. A sentence that didn't belong in a royal marriage. And in the space of 10 seconds, everything Charles believed about love, loyalty, and the life he fought decades to build shattered. But the real shock wasn't the betrayal. It was what happened after. Because when Prince William and Princess Kate rushed into Clarence House that night, they walked into a crisis that threatened not just marriage, but the entire future of the crown. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to hit like if you love detailed royal stories, subscribe for more unfolding royal dramas, and share this video with someone who follows the monarchy as closely as you do. Your support helps us bring you the most captivating stories every single week. Morning light slid gently across the study at Clarence House, brushing gold against the old wooden desk, where King Charles sat with a lukewarm cup of tea and a stack of correspondence he'd been trying to ignore since dawn. It was the kind of quiet he cherished, rare, delicate, a brief moment where he could breathe without advisors, schedules, or the relentless pressure of the crown pressing down on him. For once, he felt almost human again. Camilla had left early, hair windswept, cheeks pinkened from the chilly morning air, muttering something about taking the dogs out for a proper run. She kissed his temple lightly, almost absently, and disappeared to the corridor like she always did. Familiar, comfortable, safe, or so he believed. Her phone, as usual, was left behind on the console table. Camilla never fully adjusted her phone. Passwords annoyed her, apps confused her, and notifications irritated her. She liked things simple, predictable. Charles found it oddly charming. Until today. The first buzz barely registered. A second followed. Then a third. The screen lit up again and again, the same name appearing each time. At first, it meant nothing. Just a name. An Andrew. But something tugged at his memory. He squinted. Andrew Whitmore. A face flickered in his mind. Camilla laughing, telling a story about someone from her youth. Someone who'd known her long before the world did. Someone she'd spoken to with a softness he didn't examine too closely at the time. He shouldn't look. Every instinct told him so. He was a king of the United Kingdom, trained his entire life to uphold dignity, discipline, self-control. But the buzzing continued, and every vibration felt like a warning. He stood, slowly, each step toward the phone feeling heavier than it should have. The morning light brightened and stretched across the floor like it was pointing at the device, urging him to pick it up. One more buzz. A preview flashed. Still thinking about our conversation. Charles froze. Conversation? With who? With why? He picked up the phone. The screen woke easily, no passcode. She trusted him completely. The thought stung immediately, sharp and cruel, as his thumb tapped the message's icon almost without permission from his mind. And there it was, a thread of messages stretching back weeks, months. The early ones were harmless enough, polite, friendly, nostalgic, a reconnecting of old acquaintances. But then the tone shifted so subtly anyone else might have missed it. Do you remember that summer in Devon? You understood me in ways he never could. Sometimes I wonder too. Charles read the words twice, then 3 times, each repetition carving deeper into him. His breath hitched. Something inside him slipped, like the floor had quietly shifted, and he hadn't noticed until he lost his balance. He scrolled further. Camilla's words became a mirror he didn't want to look into. Her longing wasn't physical. No explicit betrayals, no dramatic declarations. It was deeper, more dangerous. It was emotional, the one thing he believed they preserved, even through storms, scandals, and the grief of history that always hovered between them like a ghost. An emotional affair. The phrase alone made his chest tighten. His tea had gone cold. His hands trembled. The room that once felt peaceful now felt like a cage closing around him. The early sunlight felt harsh, judgmental. He wiped at the corner of his eye, only realizing afterward that it had been a tear. He heard the front door open. The dogs barked, excited. Camilla's footsteps approached, steady and warm and familiar. For a moment, he almost put the phone back, pretend he'd seen nothing. Pretend his heart hadn't just been cracked open by a handful of sentences typed by someone she used to love. Pretend he wasn't suddenly terrified of what their life had become. But then she appeared in the doorway. "Glorious morning out there," she said, brushing snowflakes from her hair. "You should have come, darling. The primroses are—" He cut her off. "We need to talk." Her smile vanished instantly. A flicker of fear crossed her face. She recognized the tone. She knew this version of him, the version that only surfaced when something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Her eyes drifted to her phone. She understood in an instant. "You went through my phone," she said, voice sharp, defensive. "It kept buzzing," Charles said quietly. "I saw the messages." She opened her mouth, closed it, and took a step back like she'd been struck. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." His voice cracked, honest and wounded in a way he hadn't shown anyone in years. "Tell me what I'm supposed to think when my wife is wondering about a life with another man." Camilla swallowed hard. Her eyes glassed over. Her shoulders lifted, then slumped in defeat. "I just needed to feel like myself again," she whispered. "Not the queen consort. Not the villain in Diana's story. Not the woman Britain still blames for everything. Just me." "And I wasn't enough of that?" he asked. She looked down. Silence answered him. Charles felt something inside him collapse. Quietly, painfully, the way an old building gives way under pressure it's carried for too long. The study felt smaller, the air heavier, the memories around them, the framed photos, the shared furniture, the life they had fought tooth and nail to build, suddenly felt fragile, breakable, like them. He turned away from her, unable to look any longer. "I can't do this right now," he said, his voice barely more than a breath. I need time." Camilla nodded. No fight, no denial, just a slow, heartbreaking acceptance. She stepped backward out of the room, closed the door softly behind her. For the first time in decades, she didn't feel like the woman he'd fought for, and he didn't feel like the man she had chosen. Charles sank into the nearest chair, pressing his hand against his chest as if that could quiet the storm inside him. The crown was heavy, but loneliness was heavier, and for the first time, he wondered whether he could carry both. The call came just after dusk, when the Windsor kitchen still smelled like pasta, and the children were arguing about whose turn it was to choose the bedtime story. William had been leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled up, trying to fix a cabinet hinge that had come loose again. Ordinary life, the kind he clung to because it grounded him in a world that wasn't ordinary at all. His phone buzzed. "Dad." He hesitated before answering, something in him already sensing this wasn't a normal call. Charles rarely phoned at night, and the few times he had, it had always meant something monumental. "Hello." William answered, voice steady. Silence. And then, "William." Charles's voice didn't sound like a king's. Didn't even sound like his father's. It sounded like a man standing in the ruins of something he'd spent his entire life protecting. William straightened instantly. "Dad? What's happened?" More silence. A breath. A breaking. "I found messages," Charles finally said, voice cracking. "Camilla, she's been speaking with someone. Someone from before. I read things I shouldn't have. Things that make everything feel like it was never real." William felt his stomach twist. Not because of Camilla. Their relationship had always been complicated. But because of the way Charles sounded. Raw. Shredded. Like the little boy inside the grown man had finally surfaced, begging someone to just tell him it would be okay. "Where are you?" William asked. "In my study." "Is she there?" Another breath. "She's somewhere else." We weren't able to speak. Not properly. A pause. "It's over, William." "I think it's over." William closed his eyes. The hinge he'd been fixing slipped from his hand and clattered onto the counter, startling Kate, who was setting plates into the dishwasher. Kate looked up immediately, reading everything in his face with one glance. "What's wrong?" she mouthed. William covered the speaker and whispered, "It's Dad." Kate's shoulders stiffened. Then she nodded, calm, steady, instinctively stepping into the role she perfected for years. The anchor. "I'm coming." William said into the phone. "Kate and I will be there soon." "No." Charles tried to protest. "You have the children. It's late. We're coming." He hung up before his father could argue. Kate reached him in 2 strides. "What happened?" William swallowed, trying to steady the tremor in his breath. "It's Camilla," he whispered. "She's been messaging someone from her past." Dad found the phone. "He's broken, Kate. I've never heard him like that." For a second, Kate simply stared at him, not in shock, but in recognition. Something she'd feared for years was finally unfolding. "Okay," she said, voice soft but sure. "We go now. Get your coat." "What about the children?" William asked, glancing toward the living room where George was building a tower of Lego, while Charlotte narrated a dramatic story to Louis about a unicorn lost in space. Kate took his hand. "We take them with us. They'll feel the tension if we leave them behind. Better to keep the family together." Within 15 minutes, coats were on, bags were packed, and 3 sleepy children were shuffled into the back seat. Windsor's calm evening streets glowed softly beneath the lamps as William steered the car toward London. Halfway down the motorway, Kate reached across the console and threaded her fingers into William's. "Talk to me," she murmured. He didn't want to, not because he didn't trust her, but because what he needed to say felt too big, too heavy, too familiar. "It's happening again," William whispered. "Another marriage falling apart. Another generation repeating the same cycle. My mother, now him, and what does this mean for—" He glanced back at the rearview mirror. George was staring quietly out the window, his face thoughtful in a way that always reminded William of Diana. "What does it mean for them?" he finished softly. Kate squeezed his hand. "It means we teach them differently," she said. "We show them what love looks like when it survives the pressure. We don't let the crown break us the way it broke everyone else before." The drive into London felt endless, a silent road lit only by passing headlights and the tension sitting between them like a ghost. When Clarence House finally came into view, its windows glowed too brightly, a sign that no one inside had found peace that night. The moment they parked, a royal guard approached the car. He wasn't expressionless like guards usually were. His jaw was tight. His eyes flicked to the children with something like sympathy. "His Majesty is in the drawing room," he said quietly to William. He asked for you the moment he heard your car." William nodded his thanks and opened the door. The children were groggy but alert. George held Charlotte's hand. Louis trailed behind, clutching a dinosaur toy to his chest. Inside, Clarence House felt colder than usual, as if the walls themselves were bracing for impact. 2 senior royal aides hovered anxiously in the hallway, whispering to one another with clipped urgency. Then Charles appeared in the doorway at the end of the corridor. He looked old, not in the natural sense, not in the way life ages a person, but old in the way a heart breaks, suddenly, entirely, and without warning. His eyes were red, his shoulders slumped, his hands trembled slightly at his sides. "Dad," William breathed. Charles didn't say anything. He simply reached for him, and William walked forward into his father's arms. The embrace was tight, fierce, desperate. Charles clung to him like a man who had finally stopped pretending he was strong enough to carry everything alone. Kate stood nearby with the children, her eyes softening as George and Charlotte moved quietly to Charles's side. "Grandpa," George asked gently, "are you okay?" The question shattered whatever fragile composure Charles had left. He knelt, a king kneeling, and pulled his grandchildren into his arms. "I'm all right," he whispered shakily. "Now that you're here, I'm all right." Kate felt her throat tighten. The guard standing nearby subtly looked away, giving the family a private moment. William rested a hand on his father's shoulder. "We're here now," he said. "Whatever this is, whatever comes next, you're not facing alone." Charles closed his eyes, and for the first time all day, he allowed himself to believe it might be true. Rain began to patter softly against the windows of Clarence House, a quiet rhythm that only deepened the tension inside the palace walls. Royal guards, trained to be silent pillars, could feel the shift in the air the moment William and Kate arrived. Something had broken tonight. Not protocol, not security. Something far more fragile. A marriage A king, maybe even the future of the monarchy itself. And guards, though sworn to stillness, were not blind. As Charles stood surrounded by his grandchildren in the hallway, the guards positioned near the entrance exchanged brief glances. Their stoic faces revealed nothing, but behind a marble composure, they understood the gravity of what was unfolding. Anything involving the monarch, especially a personal crisis, meant a ripple through the entire institution. One guard, Lieutenant Harris, had been stationed there for almost 18 years. He had seen Diana walk through these halls. He had seen young William cry quietly behind a half-shut door after her funeral. He had seen Charles step into the role of king. And now he watched as that same king struggled to stand tall beneath a weight no crown could balance. "Sir," Harris whispered as William passed him, gently guiding Charles toward the drawing room. "If there's anything you require." "Just privacy," William said softly, and privacy was granted immediately. The door closed behind the small family with a low, heavy click. Inside the drawing room, the air felt dense, thick with emotion, with regret, with everything that had been spoken and everything that hadn't yet been said. Charles sank into the sofa with the exhaustion of a man who had spent his life weathering storms only to find himself now caught in one he never expected. A betrayal not from the public, not from the tabloids, not from his past, but from the woman he'd fought the world to be with. Kate, noticing his shaking hands, quietly placed a fresh cup of tea in front of him. It was her way. Soft gestures that spoke volumes without ever demanding attention. "Thank you, Catherine," Charles whispered. William stayed beside him, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, trying to keep his own emotions in check. For years, he had lived between two wars, the public one fought by the crown and the private one fought inside his family. Tonight, the wars collided. "What did she say after you confronted her?" William asked gently. Charles didn't look up. "She said she needed to feel like herself. Not a symbol, not the queen consort, not," his voice faltered, "not the woman blamed for Diana's pain. She said Andrew reminded her of who she used to be." William exhaled slowly. "And what about who she is now?" "That's the problem," Charles whispered. "I don't think she knows anymore." Kate exchanged a quiet glance with William, a look that held understanding, worry, and something heavier. Recognition of the same dangerous trap that had snapped shut around royal marriages for generations. Has she spoken to anyone since? Kate asked. "Family? Friends?" Charles shook his head. "She's upstairs," he murmured. "I haven't been able to go near her. I don't trust myself to stay calm. And I don't trust her to tell me the truth." The words hung in the room like smoke. Trust, the currency of marriage, the foundation of a monarchy. Once broken, it didn't just fracture two people, it fractured everything around them. Outside the drawing room, guards quietly shifted positions, not because protocol required it, simply because the tension in the air made standing still feel impossible. One guard glanced up the staircase toward the private suites, where Camilla was hiding away. Another kept watch at the main entrance, as though expecting the walls to shake with incoming scandal. In hushed tones, two junior guards exchanged questions lingering on every tongue. What happens now? But no one had answers, because what was happening inside that room was not just marital conflict. It was the beginning of an institutional tremor. Back inside, Charles leaned forward, elbows trembling on his knees. "I fought my entire life for her," he said softly. "Every headline, every scandal, every sleepless night. All because I believed our love could survive anything." William placed a hand on his father's back. "And maybe it still can," he offered gently. Charles looked at him sharply. "William," she wrote, that she wondered if she'd made the wrong choice, that she felt more understood by another man than by her own husband. What kind of foundation does that give us to rebuild on? Kate felt her heart clench. There was no gentle answer to that. "What about you?" she asked softly. "How do you feel?" Charles stared ahead, eyes distant. "I feel foolish." The word cut deep. Kate moved closer, her voice calm but firm. "You're not foolish. You're human." He shook his head. "No, kings don't get to be human." "Then that rule needs to break," William said quietly. Charles inhaled shakily, finally meeting his son's gaze. But before he could respond, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Slow, heavy, hesitant. The door opened just a few inches. A guard's voice slipped through. "Your Majesty, the Queen Consort requests to speak with you." The room froze. Kate's hand instinctively found William's. Charles closed his eyes, steeling himself. A quiet war was about to begin. One not fought with armies or protocol, but with truth, pain, and every wound they both carried into this marriage. "Let her in," Charles said. The door opened wider. Camilla stepped inside. Her eyes were red. Her shoulders sagged. Her posture, usually confident and composed, was diminished, almost trembling. "Charles," she whispered. The king flinched but didn't look away. The guards outside subtly shifted again. Even though they couldn't hear the words, they could feel the temperature of the room drop. This was no longer a private disagreement. This was history repeating itself. A monarch's marriage breaking in real time. Camilla's voice wavered as she took a step forward. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never meant to hurt you. I was lonely, lost. I didn't know how to say it without sounding ungrateful. But I never wanted to destroy us." Charles's jaw tightened, pain flickering across his face. William watched the exchange closely, understanding too well how fragile this moment was. Everything, their family, their image, the monarchy, hinged on what happened between these two people in the next few minutes. Camilla took a shaky breath. "We need to talk," she whispered, eyes full of fear and regret. Charles finally nodded. "Yes," he said softly, "we do." And with that, the silent war truly began. The rain outside had turned from a soft whisper to a steady drum, tapping against the windows of Clarence House like impatient fingers demanding attention. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating, thick with tension, raw emotion, and a fragile hope that something broken might still be repaired. Charles and Camilla sat across from each other in the drawing room, neither daring to speak first. William and Kate stood near the doorway, a quiet presence, there only because the moment was too significant to leave anyone alone. Camilla finally gathered the courage to speak. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she whispered. "I wasn't looking for someone else. I just miss feeling understood." Charles's eyes flickered with pain. "And you didn't feel understood here?" Camilla lowered her gaze. "Sometimes you're so consumed by the crown, by responsibility, by guilt about the past. I felt like I was fading into the background." "I fought for you," Charles said, voice cracking. "I fought my whole life so we could be together without shame, without hiding, without having to apologize for loving each other. And now you tell me you feel unseen?" Camilla's lips trembled. "That's exactly why I didn't know how to tell you." The words hung in the air like knives. William stepped forward slightly, his voice calm and steady. "Dad, this is painful, but it's better said now than buried." Charles turned to him, eyes sharp with hurt. "Buried? Nothing is buried. Not for us. Not ever." Kate stepped closer, her voice gentle. "But it can be understood." Charles inhaled slowly, trembling. "I read things tonight, things a husband should never have to read." Camilla swallowed hard, tears gathering. "I was foolish and selfish, but I never touched him. It was only words, memories, confusion." "That's not a comfort," Charles whispered. "You shared your heart." Camilla reached across the space between them, but Charles looked away, and in that moment, the door burst open. Everyone flinched. A senior aide, pale, breathless, clearly shaken, hurried inside. "Your Majesty, forgive me for interrupting, but you need to hear this immediately." Charles straightened, every inch of him snapping into alertness. "What is it?" The aide glanced at William and Kate, then at Camilla, hesitating. "It's already online," he said quietly. "The story." Silence. A silence so sharp it cut. "What story?" Charles asked, though he already knew. "The message is," the aide whispered. "Someone leaked the details. They're spreading fast. Social media, blogs, tabloids. It's everywhere." William swore under his breath. Kate covered her mouth. Camilla's face went white. "No," she whispered. No, 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 it can't be. But it could. And it was. The aide continued, voice trembling. We're doing everything we can to contain it. But someone at Clarence House, possibly a staff member, overheard your argument. Word spread. Reporters caught wind within minutes. Charles closed his eyes, not with anger, but with a crushing, suffocating defeat. William pulled out his phone, fingers flying as he checked the headlines. Kate stepped beside him, heart sinking as she read over his shoulder. Royal marriage in crisis. Reports of emotional affairs shake Clarence House. Camilla's secret messages exposed. I wonder if I chose wrong. Sources inside the palace confirm confrontation. Is the crown at risk? Camilla collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. This will destroy me, she sobbed. It will destroy everything. The public already hates me. Diana's shadow never left. Now this, I'll be crucified. William turned to Charles, urgency in his voice. We need a plan. Now. But Charles seemed frozen. A king, a husband, a heartbroken man, and now a public scandal. Kate stepped closer to him. Your Majesty, Charles, look at me. Slowly he did. You can't let the story control the narrative. You need to speak first. Clearly, calmly, not to excuse anyone, but to protect the crown. Charles exhaled shakily. Protect the crown at the cost of what? My dignity? My marriage? Your honesty, Kate said softly. People forgive honesty. But they don't forgive weakness, Charles whispered. William shook his head. They forgive humanity. A knock sounded at the door again. This time, it was a cabinet secretary, gray-haired, stern, always precise, the man who dealt with crises that could topple governments, destabilize markets, or fracture national unity. Your Majesty, he said, bowing lightly, we have maybe 4 hours before the newspapers finalize their front pages. We must act immediately. Charles nodded, slowly returning to himself. The crisis was his to control, or his to allow to swallow the monarchy whole. What are my options? He asked quietly. The cabinet secretary stepped inside, lowering his voice. 1. Release a statement tonight denying the more damaging interpretations and confirming that the matter is personal and being resolved privately. 2. Allow Queen Camilla to make a brief statement expressing regret for the emotional misunderstanding. Camilla looked up, horrified. They'll destroy me. 3. The secretary continued, ignoring the interjection. We announce a temporary separation for clarity, privacy, and healing. The room froze. That option meant something profound, something irreversible, something history would record for centuries. William felt his breath catch. Kate held his hand. Charles pressed a palm to his forehead. A separation, he whispered, so soon after the coronation? It may be the only way to maintain institutional stability, the secretary replied. A storm raged outside the windows, but the storm in the room was louder. Finally, William stepped forward. Dad, he said, voice steady, listen to your heart and your duty. Both matter, but only one protects the monarchy. Charles looked up at him. And what protects me? William hesitated. Kate answered softly for him. Your truth. Charles stared at the floor for a long moment, the weight of the crown and his heartbreak pressing down like twin anvils. Then he stood, slowly, deliberately. Prepare the statement. Camilla gasped. Charles. He met her eyes, not cruel, not angry, but empty in a way that shook everyone present. We will announce a temporary separation, he said quietly. We need space. The country needs clarity, and the crown needs protection. Camilla covered her mouth, tears streaming. William bowed his head. Kate squeezed his arm. The guards outside straightened, sensing the shift in the monarchy's future. The cabinet secretary nodded, turning on his heel to begin the machinery that would change the royal family forever. As Charles looked out into the stormy London night, he whispered to no one in particular, I never wanted this. And for the first time since the crown sat upon his head, he looked less like a king and more like a man watching the life he fought for slip through his fingers.